So Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve you from all evil. He shall preserve your soul. The Lord shall preserve your going out and your coming in, from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen.
Well, let's have a little look at some of the verses that these 15 Psalms contain. They start at Psalm 120 and they end at 134. But we'll just pick out some snippets. The Psalms themselves, if you look in your Bible, whether you've got a modern translation or whether you've got an authorized version, it normally carries with it this title underneath the Psalm number, a song of degrees or a song of ascents. Ascent as in going up, not ascent as in smell. And so there were 15 songs that were drawn up individually, inspired by God, and then collectively over a number of years, over quite a period of time. Tradition says that many of the Jews that were living outside of Israel at the time, when there were those celebrated feasts in particular, the Passover and Pentecost and Tabernacles and these other feasts that they would have, then the peoples would come from afar and they would have these songs. And so they would sing them on the way, apparently. And so it must have been a wonderful thing as they would go through various villages, and the singing would be increasing more and more as the numbers would gather. It's a little bit like what was happening in West Wales or Mid Wales when Daniel Rowland was preaching over there in Llangeitho. We find that when he would have his communion services, I think they were once a month, his normal congregation, if you bear in mind where he lived, it was just a village. His normal congregation was around about 2,000 to 3,000. But on communion days, that would very often increase to about 5,000. And they would come down from North Wales. They would travel so far to listen to Daniel Rowland to preach. And they would come down, they would walk through various villages, and the numbers would increase as they would be going along, and then they would stop for food, or to rest, or to sleep, because some of the journey would take longer than just a day. It wasn't just a day's journey. And they would sit together and they would sing various songs, some Welsh hymns that they would love to sing. But then, as they would get closer and closer to Llangeitho, and Brother Rowland would be preparing that morning for the people to come, he'd hear them coming up over the top of the hill. And he'd say, a little bit of heaven is coming over the hill. What a wonderful thought. The atmosphere, well, how heavy it must have been with God and the sense of God's blessing there. So, in this case, so tradition says, these psalms would be shared and sung. The last one would be one perhaps as they were leaving, because they're speaking to the Levite priests that are in the temple. Bless the Lord, all you servants of the Lord, who stand by night in the house of the Lord. Lift up your hands, and so forth, as the verse goes in there. And so they are waving farewell to the temple, to Jerusalem, to make their way back home. But they're encouraging the priests to bless the Lord, even those that are doing the night shift. I spoke to Jan this morning, and she was telling me about the night shift. I used to find the night shift really hard. Afternoons I didn't mind, but the night shift was a killer for me. It would take me, I was on continental shift, and I'd come off the night shift, and it'd take me a week to recover, then I'd be back on nights again then. It was, it used to really do me in. I'd sleep for about 8-9 hours in the day, way through. I'd conk out, but there we are. The priests would work through the night, and there would be that sense of worship that would be there. So we're going to have a look at this. As these worshippers are coming up, we're going to look at one particular worshipper, and we're going to name him or her Pilgrim. That's going to be their name. It's not going to be a he, it's not going to be a her, it's whoever it is. And the first psalm, Psalm 120, tells about Pilgrim's home and what he thought about it and how he wanted to escape it. He didn't know what to do. He prayed about it. He cried unto God for help in it. But it says that he lived in Meshech and he dwelt among the tents of Kedar. Now the problem is with that is that Meshech is in the north and Kedar is in the south. So it's obviously not one of those two places. It's what one of those two places represent. And he talks about the atmosphere that was in the village, in the home, in the house. You'd have to say possibly in his heart, because he talks about lying lips, deceitful tongues. He talks about quite a number of things, those that hated peace but loved war. And he just, I've been here too long, he says. I've dwelt in this place too long. But the problem that he had, it's all well and good praying about it, but he didn't know what to do about it. He was almost unsure as to which way to turn. Now, very often, when someone is thinking of becoming a Christian, that's some of the things that resounds within the heart. You're not comfortable with some of the situations that you've very often been comfortable with. Before I was converted, I could lie quite easily. I could fool most people. There was not many people that could catch me out if I lied. Even as a boy of 14 going into the Railway Inn, which is now I think the Kutch or something they call it, at the top of town. I remember walking into there, just a boy of 14 with a school uniform on, and just looking, and the landlord come over to me and he said, "What are you doing in here?" I said, "Well, I'm 18. He said, "Well, when were you born?" I said, 6th of May, 1952. And of course I was 56, that was my year I was born. But I had no problems. "Oh, that's fair enough," he said. I came back with the answer so sharp, so quick. And there are times when we are easy, we are comfortable, and we are part of that environment. And then there comes moments when perhaps God has been dealing with us, and we're no longer comfortable with it. And we begin to question it. We begin to question ourselves. Why am I like I am? And those thoughts begin to arise. And I can remember praying before I was converted. Praying, especially when my grandfather was ill. Praying that somehow there would be some form of escape for him. Now that prayer wasn't answered as such. My grandfather passed away just 2 weeks before I gave my heart to the Lord. But you can understand what I'm trying to say. We think sometimes about important issues in life. Do I want to be like this for the rest of my days? Do I want to have a foul mouth? Do I want to live with people that have foul mouths? And so this man, this woman, old Pilgrim, is thinking about these things. How does he get out of bed? Well, Psalm 122 tells us. Because Psalm 122 verse 1 says this, "I was glad when they said to me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.'" We made a chorus of it, didn't we, in the evening chorus book. "I was glad, very glad, when they said unto me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord today.'" There'll be singing, there'll be dancing, there'll be victory. In the house of the Lord today? Yeah, nearly got it. I almost got there then. Just over the hill. Someone invited him. Or her. Perhaps a troop as they're coming through, a group of people coming through together, and he listens to them, he watches them and asks, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" And someone just simply says, "Why don't you come with us?" Moses said the same to his father-in-law, Jethro. He said to him one time, "Come with us, we'll do you good, you know. We'll do you good." And so the invitation is given to him. We're not told of the invitation in 120, but someone has asked this group or this individual to come along to the house of God. And so he leaves home. And he leaves home by invitation. Perhaps he or she has never been to the temple before. I don't know whether they've been or not, and it hasn't really touched their lives. But here, there is something going on in this group of people. They've asked him to join with them, and he wants to join with them. He wants to find out what they got And so they make their way and they begin to travel. And some of the things that we learn about their travelling together, there was an atmosphere there. Now there was an atmosphere in the village. In the village that he likened unto Meshach. Just to tell you how antagonistic these two places were, Meshach and Kedar. Meshach is found in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's the one where the prophet says of an individual called Gog of Magog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Now there are some theologians that say that Meshach is the first name given to Moscow. And there are others that say that Tubal is the name given to Tobolsk. Now whether that is right historically, I don't know. But theologically, or what theologians have said, is that those two names, now, even after the 1,000-year millennial reign, Meshach appears right at the very end to war against the master yet again. So that shows you the antagonism that he lived in. They love war and they hate peace. Now that's not peace of saying, oh, let's just have 5 minutes to watch Crossroads or no. They don't. That's not on anymore, is it? They watch Coronation Street, 5 minutes peace to watch that. It's not talking about that peace. They hate peace. Peace that comes from above. Not earthly peace now, not manufactured peace, but peace that they hate that. But they love war. They love to fight, love to niggle, love to undermine in some sort of way. And he's tired, or she is tired of that. And they make their way. And so he says in their travels, in Psalm 126, I want to tell you what it was like. We were like them that dream. Our mouth was filled with laughter, and our tongue with singing. And the thing was, as we went from village to village, even our enemies were looking at us and saying, but this is something that God has done for us. It's an amazing thing that has taken place here. And so we have this individual pilgrim leaving Meshach and Kedar, this representation of home that is at war, that is restless, that is not at peace at all, that is full of deceit and lying, and he enters into a travel now, or into a journey, whereby he's invited to join a group of people that are making their way to the house of God to celebrate before God, to worship. And there on his journey, as he's journeying along, he notices the joy that is in the hearts of those that are traveling with him. The joy that they have. It was almost like a dream. Sometimes it's like that on holiday sometimes, isn't it? You've had a busy time in work, it's been a hard season, and you get a holiday break. And you step off the plane, or you step into the apartment, or wherever you are, whether you're abroad or in the UK, and it's a place where I know someone who's got a place down in Fishguard, and as soon as they get into Fishguard, they're completely at rest. And it's like that sometimes. But you see, when Moses said to Jethro, we can do you good, Jethro, if you come with us. This is what he was talking about. It's almost like a dream. He hasn't got to worry about the things around him anymore. There's joy there, there's singing there, there's fellowship there. Later on he talks, and just in retrospect he looks back and he says in Psalm 133, behold how good it is, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. There is something about Christian unity. It is not natural unity. There's always that danger of bringing in policies or politics into a form of unity. The Christian unity is based upon Christ. And there are times when there might be differences between individuals, quite strong differences. There were two men that were very, very close. One of them was Samuel Rutherford, and another one was Dixon, I think his name. George Dixon, I think it was. They were very much alike each other. Very much alike. Both had great understanding of the scriptures. But when it became to a political difficulty, There was tremendous differences, and they took sides with different parties. Rutherford was on one side, and Dixon was on the other. And it separated them. And they were quite strong words together against each other and against the parties. But as Rutherford began to mature and become more understanding, and as Dixon looked at the situation as well, they wished, they regretted those days because differences came between them that were not as important as the Master himself. And so there's a Christian unity that overrides these things. Love covers a multitude of sins. Now, when you're in a good mood, you're able to sweep those sins under the carpet. But when you're in a bad mood, and that irritation comes, and you want, it's not there. But these people had it. These people had it. They had a unity. Behold how pleasant, how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. Left home by invitation, he started his journey, and the journey is there. They had something that he or she had not tasted before, and they tasted it himself or herself. What about the journey itself? There was a song written by the Beatles, The Long and Winding Road. And it was a long and winding road. It seems to suggest that many of the pilgrims came across the Jordan, because they talk about being overwhelmed by waters in one of the Psalms that we are looking at. And so we find with this journey that they have, that they come to that place where they're beginning to go up to the hills of Judea. Now Jerusalem is still not in sight. You cannot see it. It's beyond the mountains. It's one of those cities that's in the midst of mountains. And so when you're going up the hill, you can't see Jerusalem as you ascend. It's not till you get to the top and you look down into the great valley or basin before you that you see the great city. And as he's going up, the journey has been a hard journey. It's a journey where there's threat of robbery. There's a journey that's threat of danger. It's a journey of weariness. And as he's going up the hills, they sing this song, I will lift mine eyes up into the hills, from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, who is the creator of heaven and earth. And he talks there about some of the titles that God holds. And he says in this particular psalm, he talks in this sense that, let me just get the verse here. I didn't pick my glass up, I should have. There we are. Verse 3 says, he will not allow your foot to be moved. That means to slip. He who keeps you will neither slumber nor sleep. It's a long journey that they're on, but there is someone watching over them. And in verse 4, there's a lovely verse, and it says this, the Lord is your keeper. Now, we understand when we say the Lord is your shepherd, or the Lord is your rock, the Lord is your salvation, the Lord is your strength, but the Lord is your keeper. Notice what it says before, he will not slumber nor sleep. That word keeper there is a lovely little word. It's related to a word that we know in the English language as eyelid. The Lord is your eyelid. And the eyelid has one purpose, to protect the most sensitive part of the body, the eye. And so here in this journey, we have the Lord who is looking over. I didn't finish quite off this morning when I said about Barak. It says concerning Barak at the end, this was the promise that the Lord gave him if he would fulfill that which Jeremiah had asked him to do. He says, if you do this, I will go with you wherever you go. I will protect you. Now that doesn't mean that he won't go into prison, and it doesn't mean that he would not die. It doesn't mean that. We've got to have different ideas of what protection means. And so we find with this, the Lord is your keeper. He will not slumber nor sleep. In the Old Testament, it talks of God's people as being the apple of his eye. And so he becomes the eyelid that protects and shields. What a lovely thought. How intimate is that in this relationship that we have with the Father above. He'll not slumber, he'll not sleep, he'll not fail you, he'll be with you and become your eyelid, your shield. And in the heat of the day, he'll protect you. In the cool and cold of the night, he'll shield you. So we find concerning these lovely thoughts that arise. In hindsight, he looks back as he enters the city. I was glad, very glad, when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. He's already come in there. He's in the city. He's celebrating, seeing what's there, and it's still a delight for him. But then he goes in hindsight. He looks back, and he says, have I done this of my own strength? You see, when you become a Christian, sometimes we do whited knuckles sometimes of determination. There are some times when we make promises that ultimately we cannot keep. We make vows and promises and things that sometimes we do it in the heat of the moment. But there is a strength that comes from above. And Psalm 124 says, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, men would have swallowed us. Waters would have overwhelmed us. And the stream would have flooded over our souls. And so this journey that has been a long journey is a journey that is steeped in God. It begins with a restlessness. There's something more to life than this. And the questions begin to be asked. Where can I go to? What can I have that can change this life of mine? And then someone, quite innocently, just says to you, why don't you come along with us? We believe we can do you good. And so you join this happy band. And you begin to notice. You begin to notice the joy that they have. One of the things that's quite noticeable over this 18-month period, or maybe more now, is the lack of joy in many a soul, mine included. A lack of joy. Yes, there may be little bursts where you feel a joy and a happiness within your step. There have been times when perhaps you've laughed you've cried with laughter about something funny has happened. But that's not the joy you're talking about here. There's a joy that can reside within your soul. So that Mr. Rutherford can speak of the prison cell that he's in as this palace of the Master. And the Master being the Lord Jesus. He talks about joy. He talks about the effect that those around. He's not looking from outside in. He's now looking out and he's noticing people are rubbing their chins and saying, what is it that they got? They have something, These were even enemies. And they're watching and they're looking at it and they're trying to weigh it up. And he's on the receiving side of their vision. And as Pilgrim makes his or her way to the city of Jerusalem, there's that sense of joy there, deep within, a sense of love and understanding. So he looks back in hindsight and he says, without God, how could I have got to this place? How on earth could I have got you? And so we come to the end of the story, really. But it doesn't just stop there. I remember talking to Dorothy Jones about 12 years ago now, when she first, just after her coming to church, and I popped in to see her and I asked her testimony. I said, when did you get saved, Dorothy? She said, I was 16. I said, oh. I said, well, tell me about how you got saved. And she said, well, I used to go to church. And friends of mine were going to a party. And it was either a party or to the cinema, one or the other. And I was going to go along with them. But I came back home. And that night I went to bed. I just didn't feel settled at all. And I dreamed a dream. And I dreamed that there was a flight of steps going up. And on the one step, there was a step there with a verse written from John chapter 10. I am the door. And I got to that step and turned to my right, and there was a door there. And I went through. And I gave my heart to Christ. And she said, the next morning I got up. And the first thing I said was, well, this will only last 6 months. Just a 16-year-old girl. She's questioning herself about the validity of her decision, the reality of that night where God has spoken to her. In a dream, it would seem. And there she is, now 90 years of age, still following the Lord. And so here we have this. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved. What a transformation, isn't it? From someone so unsettled to someone who has become so rock-like now. I remember doing judo. You remember Ian Rogers? And a nasty bit of work. Well, he would have been a year above you. We used to teach judo. Now, remember what the co-op was? That little lane used to go up there. There used to be the co-op hall. We used to teach judo in there. And I went in there. And I gave up after 6 weeks because all they wanted to teach me was how to fall. I got fed up of being thrown. I thought, well, I want to learn how to throw something. And I can remember this bloke come in. And he said, and there was a big group of us there. And the instructor said, he said, right, what I want you all to do now, he said, I want you to push against him. See if you can move him. And all he did was this. And I'd say it's half a dozen of us, but there were more. We couldn't budge him. Couldn't budge him. Bit frightening, really, in one sense, isn't it? Bit frightening. But he could not budge him. They that trust in the Lord shall be like Mount Zion, which cannot be moved. What a lovely stability of life that is in this topsy-turvy world. And so, old Pilgrim makes their way back home. We don't know what happens. But I suppose in one sense, I've just written this as a title, a testimony. But where do we stop? And really, where do we stop? Because so many things are found within these 15 Psalms that tell us about so many things. Talks about his relationship with the Lord. He says he said about lifting his eyes to the hills, but in a later psalm, he says he goes beyond the hills and he lifts his eyes to the heavens. And then he says this, as the eyes of a servant looks to the hand of their master, and as the eyes of a maid looks to her mistress, so we look unto you, O Lord. When we get in those posh circles, the hand does an awful lot. What you do at the dinner table. If you at the dinner table in certain circles fold your hands, that means you finished. As a servant looks to the hands of his master, so we look unto you. Different signals. All little signals that mean certain things. And the servant is there responding. The relationship is one of close intimacy, of watching, listening. Have you finished, Alfie? I've finished. Thank you for that reminder, Flesh. Gone. 7 o'clock. There we are. There we are. But don't be frightened of these psalms. But you think sometimes they're not relevant. They are really relevant, you know. They can speak to you where you are in the place you are and how you are. And answer those things that come within the heart. Can I be strong? Can I be faithful? Can I be trusted? Can the Lord be trusted? Can I make a move? Can I make a decision? Can I make a decision that will decide things for my life that I've never thought I'd reach again, or not again, but reach to? Yes, we can. And it's solely by the Lord himself that we give him strength to do such things. Well, time is gone.